Hey friends, Dean here with some exciting news to share. You can now buy us a coffee. That's right. You can help support independent content creators like us by becoming a member of the 3324 Green Room at buymeacoffee.com/3324. Our episodes will always be free and that will not change, but your support at buymeacoffee.com/3324 will help us continue to bring you the best in music and movie podcasting, in our humble opinion. As a Green Room supporter, you'll not only have our undying gratitude, but you'll also be able to vote on which episodes we record and receive other perks for as low as $3 per month. That's the price of a cup of coffee. There's absolutely no obligation, and nothing about the show will change. It's not going behind a paywall. Go to buymeacoffee.com/3324 for all the details. The link will be in the show notes of every episode as well. We'll see you in the Green Room. In this episode, we're taking a look at Eric Clapton's musical love letter to a married woman. It's Derek and the Dominos' only studio album, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs. Stay with us.
Get ready for the 3324 podcast, where lifelong friends Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber share their love of all things music and movies. Dean has directed short films and is a music trivia buff. And Eric, trained in audio engineering, brings his extensive knowledge of music and film to the conversation as they discuss, debate, and celebrate their favorite albums, films, and much more.
Welcome, friends, to the 3324 podcast. Another wonderful episode, another wonderful set of guests. Of course, Eric is not a guest. He's mentioned that in the past that he's a guest. He's not. He's the co-host. He's not a guest.
I just like the
Uncle Buck is a guest, right? He comes and he never leaves. That's like, we don't want those kind of guests. We've got
hanging out on the couch.
Yeah,
our cigar. Where's
exactly
the beer? Yeah,
but when we end our episodes, the guests leave because we just shut the whole thing down and we throw them out. So we're not that we're not too we don't really hide what we're trying to do. When it's time to go, it's time to go and get out. But he's here with us. He's here with us right now, Mr. Christopher Clark.
Hey, how you doing?
How are
guys?
you? How's
Welcome
things?
back.
I'm very good. Glad to be back. I'm doing very well.
Glad to have you back. Glad to have you back.
Yep.
Glad to have someone so young be so formidable in their music knowledge.
Yeah,
And I'm excited about this record tonight.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, this one is one of
the
Eric's.
greats.
Yeah, this is one of Eric's tops.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have to say it's not one I've listened to all that much. So I'm going to be coming at it from Eric has the expert point of view. Let's put it that way. He's lived this album. He's digested it so many times. It's a part of literally his musical quilt and his musical tapestry. So as Eric Clapton is his favorite artist. So that's not going to stop us from doing Three Truths and a Lie, though. I hope not.
No, seriously, I'm looking forward to that part.
Yeah, this is the Clapton edition. I was sweating like a hostage. Trying to do this.
I'm curious to see what you came up with on this.
I'm like, I know Eric read all these books about Clapton. I know
he's going to probably try to stump me. Yeah,
that was my only mission. Right? I actually said, you know what? I don't think I'm even going to listen to this album. I just want to come up with the 3 lies and a truth so I can stump Eric. Like all my energy needs to go into. I need to be single-minded to get it. So we'll see. I don't think so. I think Eric's just going to wipe the floor up. Chris, you're my only hope. I'm only hoping that your knowledge is just not.
I don't know.
I know, man. I know. I love this era. I love this era of Eric Clapton. So I got a pretty deep knowledge of it. So.
All right. Well, we're gonna see here. We're gonna find out. So stay tuned with us for that. Of course, we have some fun with that, and we invite you at home, if you're listening, wherever you are in your car, to play and hit us up on social media. Let us know how you did. If you scored well, if you're keeping score each episode, we'd love to know. So you can do that on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube. You can leave comments there as well. All right. Let's dive in. Since this is a double album, it won't be a double length episode, but we'll be able to get everything done that we need to get done. It's so no worries. Even though
I just realized that I should have wore green. I should have wore a green T-shirt because I'm just looking at my background, and I'm thinking, oh man, that's the colors of the album cover right there.
Yeah,
I got that yellow and white hue. I needed a green T-shirt, hints of green.
Yeah, something.
And maybe
Nice.
some
You went with
flowers on the
well,
side.
he went with
Little
all
flare of
black.
red.
Usually he wears white headphones.
Yeah.
Usually,
Yeah. I asked my son.
certain...
I said, I want yours tonight. I don't know why, because they cover my ears very well, and these are really, really comfortable. Those white ones just kind of like
they
start to sweat. You know,
those are like those are the low bot headphones. The other ones you used to wear. They're kind of tight to the ear area. You know, not a whole lot. Not a lot of room.
They're good headphones though. They're Beats, but they're just you know, after a while your ears just start to burn.
Sweat,
you know,
and
these
hurt,
just they fit. Yeah. So
nice.
Anyway,
not to worry, everybody. We've got a headphone review episode coming up. Where we're going to do our top 5 headphone picks.
For all you techies out there,
number 1, Kobe. Number 1, Kobe.
Yeah.
Remember Kobe brand at COBY?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, that's right.
The cheapest knockoff that they would sell in like, Record Town or any of those stores. It was like, Kobe.
Sony, Sanyos were pretty popular back in the day.
Panasonics were good.
Yeah.
Panasonic. Yep.
Yeah, I just actually for the people on YouTube, if we do post this, I just picked this up at an estate sale. This is an AM
look at that
Walkman with the radio. I think it needs a belt replacement, but these go for a lot of money, like in the resale market. So I got this for like a song. But the radio works. The radio works and it powers up, but the tape doesn't, and it makes a squealing sound. So I'm thinking that elastic, band that's in there is just kind of probably rotted away. It's probably dust in there. So those are easily replaceable. So yeah, we've got a nice Walkman. That's really nice. Cool. Yeah. So anyway, we're going to go to a time before Walkmans in our stats. Layla and other assorted love songs, released November of 1970. Produced by Tom Dowd. I wrote Tom Down in my notes. We're going to fix that. I got it right, though. Produced by Tom Dowd and Derek and the Dominos. There were 2 singles actually released from this album. Bell Bottom Blues hit number 91, so it's legitimate that he had the Bell Bottom Blues with that. And then Layla hit 51. It did 40 more leaps higher, but that's not what this album is known for. It did go to number 16 on Billboard, certified gold. That's only 500,000 copies. So, and
not a big seller.
Yeah, and at the time, right, Eric, I think this was the reviews were mixed at best. Mixed heading towards they weren't that impressed with it. It's like much like Pet Sounds. It's an album that had in its as it's aged, the appreciation has grown for. At least that's what I've been getting from when I was reading about the critical response upon its initial arrival.
Yeah, they some people just weren't too kind. I don't know. People were. I think the marketing had a lot to do with it. Clapton came up with the idea that, I want to go anonymous with this record. I don't want to be known, because he had just done that first solo record with Duane and Bonnie. And this, he wanted to he thought it might be kind of cool to just, do it. He loved the band atmosphere. He wanted to be the leader of a band again. And it just didn't fly. I think a lot of critics just knew right out the gate who it was and what was going on here. And I attribute it to a lot of that, I think. And people just didn't know what to make of it, I guess, when it came out. So, yeah. But Chris, you had something to say?
I was going to say, to your point, like of him wanting to be anonymous in the background, the record company reacted so adversely to the fact that it really wasn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. They actually started to produce pins that said Derek is Eric.
Derek is Eric, yeah.
So everybody knew that it was Eric Clapton. I was actually in the band. Yeah.
Yeah, and several re-releases of the LP over time. There was a few labels got involved. There was Polydor. There was and one of the covers actually had Derek and the Dominos written on it. The painting on the cover was chosen by Clapton, a famous French painting that he had seen, and he just loved it. But there was no title, no nothing. It was just a painting. And I think people were kind of baffled by that as well. So I think in subsequent re-releases of the record, they did print a pressing of Derek and the Dominos, sort of going around, but that was later on. But again, the marketing just wasn't there. It was just an odd release. Yeah.
Let's make the most inconspicuous album we can, featuring one of the most featuring one of the most in demand guitar players at the time. That's not going to set you up for success.
You couldn't ask for a more. Yeah, just this cover just alone is baffling. It's like, but of course, when you dig into the album, you kind of
of its time. I think the cover is of its time. I mean, it was, that cover art.
He was trying to be artsy.
Yeah, trying to make a statement, and that's when a lot of that covers back then were. And you know what? It's iconic now for the fact that it doesn't have any writing on it, and there are no logos, and it has now become iconic in its visual of that painting. That it's Layla.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's the same time as when Zeppelin put out 4 with just the symbols on the cover. So it is kind of like that, all that iconography and Dark Side of the Moon very shortly after, without any kind of real indication of who's playing. So Dean's 100% right. It's very of its time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about where Clapton was around this time, because it seems like he was looking for a home, Eric, right? He had been through the Yardbirds. He had been through the Blues Breakers. He had been through Cream, and he kind of, saw the writing on the wall with Cream. He knew that things were not going well. So what did he do? He went to America and he went to Woodstock, right? The famous story, with ambitions of joining the band. Right. Yeah. He went out to Woodstock and kind of met up with Robbie Robertson and was kind of almost afraid to ask. And I was reading one thing today where Robbie's like, do you think that are you looking to be a second guitar player, or are you looking to replace the guitar player that's here, which would be me? And Clapton never answered.
Well, I can't imagine just the audacity of this guy just showing up on their doorstep at Big Pink and just be like, hey, I want to join your band. And the thing of it was that Clapton was such a blues, freak, at the time, and everything was just blues to him. It was like, it was his mission to bring this music to, he thought it was so important, and he just was so arrogant about it and so sort of like preachy about it, and he wasn't really digging much of anything else at the time. But then he started hanging out with Delaney Bramlett, and I don't think and that's really where this kind of thing started happening. And I don't think he doesn't get enough credit, because I think if it weren't for him, because he when he was in Blind Faith, okay, so hanging out with Steve Winwood, and that just kind of imploded as it began, because the press got wind of what they were doing. And then, right out the gate, Clapton was like, I don't even want to do this, because, to him, it was just getting together and doing some fun jamming. And of course, the press was like, oh, it's another super group and it's another Cream. And then, of course, Ginger Baker shows up and he's like, I want to be in this band. And so they worked up an album, once again, one album, and they just, not enough material was there. So they were using stuff from Cream's, so the opening act was Delaney and Bonnie and Friends. So it was just sort of, Clapton started hanging. He became quite enamored with what they were doing. This sort of rock, funk, Southern rock, feel, somewhat folky, but yet, and it was sort of a hybrid of that. And he was really enamored with that. And he started hanging out with them while touring with Blind Faith on their tour bus. And much to Steve Winwood's chagrin, and of course, he never forgave him for that. For years, they were kind of like estranged, because
that makes a lot of sense, Eric. Sorry to cut you off. Now it makes sense why Steve Winwood was sitting in the audience during the concert for George and not on stage. Yeah. Right? Remember, if you watch the concert for George,
that's right.
Like Steve Winwood's in the audience, like watching as like a spectator. I'm like, why isn't Steve Winwood on the stage? I don't know if it made sense by then, but
They played some gigs. They did the Ronnie Lane's Arm tour together, like in '83. Some, but they just weren't. I had the opportunity to see sort of the re-kinship at Crossroads 2007. I got to see that. This was after Concert for George. And he had wanted to invite Steve Winwood, which I had no idea that the guy could play guitar as well as he
Steve
did.
Winwood's badass, yeah.
Yeah, he's a formidable player in his own right. He invited him to the second Crossroads Festival because I guess they just didn't have enough. There was too many people on the bill for the first one in Texas, and he always wanted to invite Steve Winwood. It didn't happen. So this one he did. And I was lucky enough to get to see that, which was nice. It was good to see that sort of reunion, and they did, they played well together, and it was just, and from there, the friendship was reforged, but
rekindled.
Then they went out on the road and they played some dates. They put out a record where they played at the Garden.
Yes,
and then right around the time my daughter was born, I got to see them play the Meadowlands, and that was a phenomenal show. They had a really great band behind them.
Yeah,
they did an acoustic set in the middle of the show. It was fantastic performance. They were really good together.
Yeah.
Makes you wonder what would have happened if he joined Eric Clapton joined Traffic.
If they had stayed, if they had kind of stayed collaborating in that during that early time. Getting back to Delaney and Bonnie, so what happens is Clapton kind of poaches the backing band, right? And these guys played on All Things Must Pass, right? Also, which was happening.
Yeah, they were
George Harrison's kind of group studio band. So there was this kind of little community that was going on, and Clapton decides, well, I'm just I like working with these people, right? I think there's something there, so let me grab them for this Derek and the Dominos project, and then pick us up with Duane Allman, Eric. I mean, he kind of was he came to a Clapton show, or Clapton went to go see Duane. Was it Duane? He went to go see Duane, right? And
Clapton went to see the Allmans,
because Tom Dowd was a famous engineer producer. He had did the sound for Live at the Fillmore East, the famous Allman Brothers record, and various artists. I mean, the guy did Ray Charles. The guy's a genius.
Skinner.
He worked on the Manhattan Project at one point. The guy was like an engineer, nuclear physicist. Then he got into sound. And then he just became a record producer. But I just want to step it back to Delaney and Bonnie because it was, like very much like the band, Clapton wanted to play with Delaney and Bonnie. He just wanted to be the side man after Cream. And Delaney Bram was like, no, man, you got to step up to the mic. You got to sing, start writing some songs. You're Eric Clapton. You need to be in the spotlight. And that's where that first solo record came from. It was sort of like his, the sort of prototype of Layla, if you will. It was more or less a Delaney Bonnie album, but with Eric Clapton singing lead. And if you listen to the both, I mean, they're very, very similar in voice and style. It was also, I also found out that Delaney Bramlett was also responsible for putting a bottleneck slide in George Harrison's hand.
Oh,
he's the guy that inspired him to play slide. You never heard George play slide with the Beatles. It was only after, like on All Things Must Pass, that he started, so they were all like just together and hanging out. And that experience, of course, led to Layla. But Duane came in, it was a fluke. It wasn't meant, that was totally spontaneous. Allmans were in town. They were recording at Criteria Studios in
Florida, right?
In Miami. Yeah. So, and Tom's like, yeah, Eric, the Allmans are in town. We should go see them. Oh, you mean that guy that played on the Wilson Pickett record? He did that fantastic solo on Hey Jude, his rendition of Hey Jude. He was an admirer already of the Allman Brothers band, so they went to see him. The famous story goes is that Duane Allman's in the middle of a solo. Clapton and Tom Dowd were sitting like in between, like where the barriers are between the first row and then the stage, and they were sitting like on the sandbags, looking up at Duane Allman in the middle of a solo, and Duane froze when he saw Clapton sitting there. And then Dickie Betts, we just lost Dickie Betts. I just shout that out. But Dickie Betts, he's like, what the fuck are you doing? He starts playing a solo. Then he sees Clapton and he freezes. So then Duane Allman just kind of picks it up. So invitations, introductions were made, and then they invited the entire band back to the studio to jam, and that's where that came from. And it just brought a whole new dynamic to the record.
Yeah.
So,
and Clapton has said, and Clapton had said, this is the closest thing to a brother that I didn't know I needed to have, really a kindred spirit of someone who right. They from what I read, that night that they first met, they were just kind of jamming and trading licks and not even talking about it, not even kind of conversing about it, just kind of playing songs that they both knew and just going back and forth. And that comfort level, I think that Clapton was looking for. He probably didn't realize he would find it in another guitarist, Eric. I'm guessing that he probably didn't realize that it would take, he was probably looking for a band to be in, but I think having someone appear on his level, yes. that would be the inspiration for him.
Clapton was, I've discovered over the years that Eric is always at his best when there is another guitar player present to light a fire, because he tends to be very lazy. He tends to be, he just does only so much, and then he hides behind his insecurities, and he's like, but to be challenged by these great players over the years, and lighting that, and he gets inspired, and when he's on fire, man, watch out. He's just absolutely stunning in his playing. And Chris,
a few years ago, Derek Trucks was on the Mark Maron podcast, and that whole thing came up about how Clapton is lazy, and sometimes he just because he kind of rests on his reputation, and then every now and again something lights a fire under him, and you go, there it is. And Derek Trucks tried to push him to try different guitars, different songs, and it's interesting, on that tour they were playing a lot of the Layla tunes, and that's kind of almost what lit a fire under him.
Oh yeah, well he was they were like the Young Lions, right? Him and Doyle Bramhall II on that tour. Yep. He invited Derek Trucks to a phone call. It was just like, hey, you want to play in our band? Because through Doyle's recommendation, because they had known each other, because Doyle had played with Susan Tedeschi, and he gets this phone call out of the blue, and so Eric was like, what do you guys want to play? And they're like, well, we don't want to do stuff from Journeyman and necessarily or like the later stuff. We want to do Layla. We want to do like the early stuff. And that became that was probably the best set list of any Clapton show that I had ever seen up to that point, because I got to hear 3/4 of the album done.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So live for the first time, because he never, a lot of these, like I Am Yours, him and Derek singing in the round, playing, the beautiful acoustic, just the two of them, and Derek was just channeling Duane Allman that night. I saw him at the Garden, and it was just, that kind of stuff just really brought tears to my, because it was just like, that's a song he had never done live, I don't think. And just, but these guys knew, because they grew up with this stuff. And Derek was named after, that's his namesake. He was named after the record. His father used to play it for him and his brother. His brother's name is Duane. He's Derek. And so that album is extremely important to him. But let's kind of, let's dive into the album.
Yeah. You read my mind. I was just going to say that. I was like, enough of the small talk. Let's dive into this. It's a double album, so you got 4 sides. What I think would be fun, normally we do favorite tracks. When we get to the end, I think it would be fun to do favorite side, since there's so much to pick from. And I think that that might be a little bit more challenging to for me. I was kind of looking at it, I'm like, oh, wow, I really like this side, and I really like the stuff on this side. So I think it might be more fun to pull out like the sides towards the end. We'll see. But
I can't remember the last time I actually saw it on vinyl to know which side, where the sides start and end.
Yeah. Go to Wikipedia really quick, and it'll have it there for you. it's got it broken up by sides. Oh boy, yeah. So Duane Allman kind of came and went through this. I mean, they had recorded Bell Bottom Blues before Duane Allman joined. Duane Allman came in, and he had some commitments with the Allman Brothers, kind of took care of that, and then came back in. So it's it's very interesting that Duane Allman was doing this project, but still very much Allman Brothers, in the main position. Let me get my peccadillo out of the way, Eric, and maybe you can set me straight. Okay. Well, actually, there's two things that bother me about this album. One is the production. I just don't think it doesn't sound great. Sometimes things sound blown out to me, like the guitars, especially on like Bell Bottom Blues.
Wow.
When it gets to that crescendo and chorus, everything sounds like it's about to blow out. It sounds like it's on the upper, almost going into the red.
I think that's one of its best qualities.
Really? Well, and that's and you guys can take it from there. And then the other thing that I kind of not became a fan of is, and it seems to be his hallmark and his trademark, but Duane Allman's propensity to play all the way up on the almost like the very end of the neck, very high, and those squealing notes. It kind of got to, sometimes it would start to get to me. I'm like, it's a little too much of that. I want to hear something else from Duane Allman, not that, but it seems like that was his trademark. So
a lot of
those
high
are my
end,
two.
High end notes.
Go ahead and pick those two things apart, guys. Have at it. I threw the meat. I threw the meat. I threw the meat. I threw the meat into the arena.
So interestingly, that's one of the things that's kind of a hallmark of the record, insofar as that, like, he recorded it on like a really tiny amplifier called a Fender Champ.
Yeah,
I guess it's like a studio amp, but I'm sure he had it like, I'm sure he had it like maxed out. But like, to me, I like that dirty sounding guitar. Like, to me, the raw, I wouldn't go so far as to say demo like sound, but that raw recording to me is what kind of gives some of the record its charm. And I think these are some of the best guitar solos I've ever heard on a Clapton record. And I've never actually sat down to figure out if it's Duane or Eric. I just like all the soloing on the record. To me, what you dislike is what draws me into the record.
Well, let me clarify. I don't mind the soloing. I mind the sound of it. It's not, it gets messy. And I wrote in my notes, and it's funny you should mention that. I wrote, it could be better produced, and it sounds like a jam session. Now, if that's the way it was supposed to sound, then fine. If it was supposed to have that loosey-goosey sound, but I need to point to the song Layla, which is the outlier on this album. That song sounds nothing. It is well produced. It is well arranged, and it sounds great. And nothing else on the album sounds like that. So is Layla the outlier? Kind of like, oh, okay, we're going to make something that's really like really kind of well arranged, and everything else is kind of like a hang. Eric, is that kind of, that's what blows me, especially when you listen to the whole album. And Layla is the second to the last song, and then you hear this song that's so full of things, and the arrangement, and the guitars are, Duane Allman's guitar work on that is fantastic, and it's not in the way it sounds on other songs. It sounds like the other songs almost sound like a hodgepodge, like they're just kind of. And again, if that's the way it's supposed to be, then great. I'll let you take it away.
well, it took a long time for me, because you know how picky I am about production as well. And at that time, in the late 80s, that's when I really kind of first discovered it. Mm-hmm. I thought it was a mess. I thought, the first, it was just, oh man, all these overlapping guitars and overlapping voices. Bobby Whitlock's not really harmonizing with Eric there. They're kind of just singing over one another. And it really took a long time for me to really appreciate what Chris was saying, that, I think it was intentional for it to be down and dirty and gritty, and just these guys just coming in and a lot of it was based on just jamming, because there wasn't really a plan to the record. Mm-hmm. It was just Clapton, like very much like Cream. He was just like, oh, it's just, what do we do? Like, let's just, are we going to do blues standards? I mean, the obviously the inspiration for this record is his unrequited love, his obsession with George Harrison's wife, Pattie Boyd.
Yep.
And that was the basis for, and Eric only writes when he has something to say. And he doesn't write that often. And, even then it's like, he's not the greatest songwriter. He's very simple. He's very honest. I felt like the passion that he felt for this woman was, that in itself, for a young teenager sort of getting into that, this was something else. This was like, how could somebody be so obsessed with this person and write these passionate songs? So that's what I really kind of took from it. And again, it took several listens, and it took very, if you really listen to it with headphones, then you start to look for things. You look for all the different guitar riffs and the voices and what's going on. And here, then you start picking up on the fact that Jim Gordon's playing, Indian drums and tablas and things like that, and just these exotic kind of things that they're, so the artistry is there. It is kind of a messy record, to be sure, but if you think about it, Clapton would never make another album like it.
No. Nope.
And he would always be accused of being a little too rigid with his stuff, very exact, very precise, very clean. Even with the blues is supposed to be a lot more loose and dirty, and he just made it more accessible and perhaps even more slightly more glamorous in his style. So, Chris,
and to your point about Clapton's songwriting, like, he's not the greatest songwriter. If you look at the record, he doesn't write anything on his own. It's usually in tandem with, most of it's in tandem with Bobby Whitlock if it's a Clapton original. And the other thing, is being rigid. I feel like this is his last truly, truly great record. Like, I know people point to 461 Ocean Boulevard, but to me, that's almost like where you start to see the cracks start to appear. Like, it's a good record, but it's not Layla or any of the incredible run that came before. I mean, in 1 year, he did the live record with Delaney and Bonnie. He did the first Eric Clapton solo record. He did this, and the year before was Goodbye Cream and Blind Faith. So, I mean, and then I feel like you see that kind of taper off. So that I definitely agree with you on both of those points.
Well, he definitely changed the whole with 461. He changed. That was the reason that album was so well favored, is because he just made such a complete change in his sound. Like, he just went more acoustic and more, but even on this record, those roots were already being planted. When you consider what Layla was supposed to be to begin with, which was very much like the way he did it on Unplugged. That was the intent, was to do it acoustically, and it's sort of almost like self-deprecating in a way, sort of like, down on his luck guy in love with this woman, and he's just, and then it was Duane Allman who came up with the riff, and it's inspired by Albert King's Years Go Passing By. If you ever listen to that tune, look it up.
Yep.
Yeah, you definitely hear it. That you hear like Albert King is singing the riff, and you hear it, and it's but Duane took it and he sped it up, and that's where the like that whole, and it just, and the reason, I guess, that because of Duane and because of that, this was something that they were really, really focusing on, and I think that's probably the one song off the album that they spent the most time on. There's no doubt about that.
You can it sounds like it. Now let's
tell. Yeah,
we have to jump back to Pattie Boyd, because I that's a big, I forgot it's on my list, and then I just kind of skipped over her. We have to talk about this woman. I mean, she has inspired, she inspired kind of this obsession in Eric Clapton. Pattie Boyd was first unattached to anybody in the rock and roll hemisphere, but then she met George Harrison. George Harrison asked her out, and she was dating someone at the time, and she said no. She breaks up with that guy and hooks up with George Harrison. They end up getting married. And then Clapton gets a look at her and is just gobsmacked. I mean, he's obsessed. So much so that he thought dating her sister would kind of help cure him of this obsession. So he dated Pattie's sister for a while. And this is all while George Harrison was still married, and these guys were friends. I read, Pattie Boyd recently said, she goes, "I'm not sure Eric was actually ever in love with me." She goes, "It almost felt like he wanted something that George had. She felt like he always had to have what George had. Like, because he was that kind of like, they were very close. So it was almost more like a possession than
that makes sense.
Than a person. Yeah. Like, I need to possess this person, and you hear it in, I mean, you'll never get a more impassioned vocal performance than in Layla. I mean, it is in one of the top, it's in the pantheon of just putting it all out there, but between the guitar work matching the intensity of the vocal, and Clapton would spin into a heroin addiction because of this. He would kind of disappear for a few years. This person just really got, I don't want to say got under his skin, because I don't want that to be a negative connotation. Got into it. It's like she got into his soul. And the only way, like Chris said, the only way he could express this is through music, is to lay these songs out. But the strange thing is, she's quote unquote happily married to George Harrison still. So he's trying to woo somebody, but do it covertly. I'm sure George Harrison had to know. I'm sure it wasn't
pretty underhanded.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. When you really think about it, it's, but you listen to the story. It was the George Harrison documentary. They spent a lot of time talking about this, and George and Eric, like you say, they were very much, they were both obsessed with possessions. They were both into cars. They all had, they had other interests, and, Clapton's addictions didn't just end with drugs and alcohol. I mean, he was obsessed with cars, women.
Yeah.
Even when he did win Patty Boyd over and married her, he basically treated her like shit. I mean, it's just like it didn't stop him from fucking every woman that came, like he would not let her on, tour with him. Like, she had to stay home. It's just his behavior. I mean, it's just, he regrets all these things now, but
not a good guy.
I mean, no.
Didn't his son that passed away, wasn't he the result of an affair he had?
He had an affair with an Italian model, Lori Del Santo, and she,
Now, but
while he was still married to Patty.
While he was married to Patty Boyd,
While he was married to Patty. But before we move off Patty Boyd, Eric, did you ever hear the story about the guitar duel that Clapton wanted to have a duel, a literal duel, a guitar duel with George Harrison for Patty Boyd, and that was at the time when they were married. Did you hear that?
I've never heard that.
I vaguely. I mean,
I don't know whatever. I don't think it ever happened, but that was supposedly something that was going around.
I think it's more in jest. I think it's something that George probably came up with, I'm sure. But he was like, when he found out at that point, because he was so much into spirituality and so much into him, like his inner self and, all of that kind of stuff, he kind of treated her the same way, in a sense, like she was just a possession, it's kind of fucked up that he just basically said, yeah, take her.
Yeah, he was no saint either.
He really didn't fight for her. Like, if you guys, he goes, I'd rather you be with him than anybody else, because he's like my best friend. So, I mean, the entire situation is just bizarre.
George Harrison used to call Eric Clapton his husband-in-law, because it was like the relationship was so close there. But I want to move on to something that Chris said, since he brought it up. I want to put this question out there, and then I promise we have to talk about this album. We'll get there. You was it all downhill after this for Clapton? Chris kind of mentioned, and I wrote that down too. I wrote kind of because if you look at what like his output in the 70s, yes, he got, he kind of became more popular. But was this, Eric? Let me start with Eric, and then we'll jump over to Chris. No, start with Chris. Chris, was Layla the high watermark? Not just you could say in the 70s, or you could say in his total.
I think if his career ended with the recording of Layla, we'd still be talking about Eric Clapton the same way we talk about him now. I definitely, like, I know the last time I was on, we had the discussion about the Queen records, which was the most recent episode to drop about the game being like, Rob and I both said, like, there were moments of brilliance, but like not as consistent. That's how I feel about Clapton after that. Like, my old man listened to Clapton beginning to end, A to Z. So like, I always heard those records growing up, but the ones that to me always felt like I could listen to from beginning to end were Layla back. Layla forward, I would kind of cherry pick what I liked, because I thought those records were far more patchy, in my opinion.
I would say that He never made a definitive album after Layla. You could definitely, there wasn't any like really great statement beyond Layla. I think his best work is when he sobered up, is when, the 90s saw like a really, he came back with a passion. Unfortunately, it might have been a little too late at that point. I don't know, but I feel like, when he did that blues tour, when he finally made a blues record that he was proud of, and he had the voice to do it and the confidence to do it, was after he stopped drinking. And it was the death of his son, unfortunately, that really kind of made that happen.
What about Unplugged? How does Unplugged fit?
Unplugged's a great record.
Do you think that maybe bookends his career with like Layla, and Unplugged kind of closes out? Because that kind of is it's not a studio album, but it's kind of a statement from Clapton, and everybody kind of embraced Clapton at that point, and kind of like, everything that he had been through. Like I said, he was sober at that point, Eric, right? And he put on an Unplugged show that was very easygoing and very comfortable, right? It wasn't for like everything that was kind of there was kind of, kind of felt like, oh yeah, this is kind of,
I felt like, I think I think the show, and at the time when I watched the show, we were in the throes of feeling sorry for him at that point because of what happened, the tragedy of losing a son. I mean, a child is it's the worst thing that could happen to anyone. And I really honestly feel like that was part of it. I that should have never been his best selling album.
Yeah.
That's just not, to me, it's a performance. It was personal. I look at it that way. I look at it more of like, it gave him the confidence to do these blues numbers and to kind of like get back into songwriting. And like I said, he wouldn't write this much since Layla, right? And it took a tragedy like this to make that happen. So he wrote several songs, albeit they were very, they're just acoustic numbers, and that was the way of channeling his grief. But everybody was waiting for him to fall off the wagon, but that didn't happen. He wrote songs.
Thank goodness.
So yeah. Then he went on to, but for me, that's what that album represents. It should have never won as many Grammys as it did. I don't think it's too personal of a statement. And when it went there, it was just kind of like, yeah, is this gratuitous? Is this because we're supposed to feel sorry for him at this point? I don't know. I think
maybe a lot of people connected with it,
yeah.
And
Tears in Heaven, people, alone
made it personal.
Is a song that's very universal. I mean, he wrote it about his son, and he would write other songs that were a little bit more like the circus, when the circus left town. That's that's the last thing he did specifically with his son, was to take him to the circus the day before. So that was really on the nose, whereas Tears in Heaven is a much more universal track. And of course it appealed and touched a lot of people. So Chris, you had something to say.
I was going to say to Eric's point, I think Clapton Unplugged is the only Eric Clapton album my wife ever owned. Like, she had it when we first got together. And
same.
The only reason she would listen to an Eric Clapton album is because she heard Tears in Heaven and knew the story. So I definitely think he caught a huge piece of the music listening populace because of that record. But to me also, I think, I don't know if it's should have gotten all the accolades, but to me it was kind of cool. It's the same idea of Almost Layla, where it's raw. He's jamming on some old school blues tunes from his influence of Robert Johnson. And I think it was kind of interesting to look into and hear those songs. And that's actually the last record by him that I remember ever being noteworthy. It was almost like nobody, unless you're a Clapton fan, I don't know if anybody knows anything past Clapton Unplugged anymore.
Yeah, and they played the kazoos, and they played the kazoos on that album. Right?
Yes, at the end. Yes, they did.
Which was a lot of fun.
Andy Fairweather Low.
Yeah, it was fun. All right, let's get back into this. What about Duane Allman, Eric? What about Duane Allman on this album? I mean, he is just as probably an important part of this, right? Because I don't think the album would have been the same without him. He was definitely a catalyst or a spark that kind of lit the fuse that made this album what it would become, right? Is having that second guy that plays the blues but plays it differently. That's the thing too, right? It's not two blues players that kind of play the same way. Duane Allman has a particular style. It's slide, and it tends to be higher up on the neck, and it's got that kind of squealy sound. And that's almost, Chris, you were saying, how can you tell? That's almost how you can tell. I think after listening to it a lot, and there was actually a quote. Actually, Clapton said, "Oh, I'm playing this guitar, and he's playing that guitar." I'm like, I can't tell that way. I think you can tell by I think it's more technique. If you listen, you can kind of almost
just generally accepting the slide.
Generally accepting the slide is Duane, right?
It's Duane, right?
Well, Eric does play a little bit of slide on the record, but I think for the most part he's bending strings. Whereas, and Duane, to his credit, I mean, at that point he wasn't really playing slide all that long. This was like really the first real album where he really kind of let that flow on a studio record, and he would cite this as one of the most important things that he ever did. So this album actually became a touchstone in not only Eric Clapton's legacy, but also the Allman Brothers, because it stands as part of their story as well, which I think is cool. I mean, it's cool as hell. I mean, the reason I love this album so much is not just because of Eric Clapton. I mean, they really caught lightning in a bottle here. This was unprecedented to have somebody just come in at the last minute and just turn it into something so fresh and so you can forgive the jamming aspect to the album. Like you pointed out, Dean, it feels very, sort of not rehearsed and very sort of, so perhaps they just didn't have the time to put, because Duane was touring with the Allmans. He had to go, and he actually considered leaving the Allman Brothers to join Derek and the Dominos. And Butch Trucks was like, "What the fuck what are you thinking?" He's like, "You created the Allman Brothers. You got a good thing going. You're going to stand in Eric Clapton's shadow. That's all that's going to be. And he's just going to move on," which he would have, because he does.
Plus your name is on the band. It's the Allman Brothers. So if you leave, it'll just be the Allman Brother band. Which unfortunately, it would actually become because Duane Allman would tragically die just less than a year later in a tragic motorcycle accident. The dude was 24 years old when he recorded Layla. I mean, this guy was a kid. He was a kid.
Yeah,
Duane Allman. He was a child. Most guitar players don't hit their stride until well after that. Hendrix was 27 when he died, so he was Duane Allman was already ahead of the curve, with what he was doing. He was kind of way out there, and it's one of those rock and roll what ifs. It's kind of like, what if he had stayed alive? Maybe Derek and the Dominos, because this is the only album that they made. So maybe Derek and the Dominos would have reformed as a side project. It could have, since Clapton had such a great time with it, right? Right, Eric? It wasn't that Clapton has bad memories of this. He had a great time with it. But the tragedy
even today,
that
he would say,
it was the tragedy
he would say even today that it's the best band I've ever played with. And he's talking about not only Duane, but Carl Radle, Bobby Whitlock, Jim Gordon. These guys were like, to this day, he cites that as the best band he's ever played with. So, Bobby Whitlock, he's the other vocalist and keyboardist and co-songwriter and he wasn't too keen on having Duane there either. So there was both sides of it. You had members of the Allman Brothers that were just, they weren't digging what they were doing. These were song oriented. They're used to jamming out, doing this jazzy kind of blues thing, this like long, improv type stuff. And they just weren't digging the sort of 4 or 5 minute song thing, to make an album. They didn't really want Duane to kind of get too much into that. But of course they would go on to do that with Brothers and Sisters. After Duane passed, Dickie Betts started writing songs much like in that same vein. So where does the inspiration begin? And you know what I mean? So there's this plethora of music that was just absolutely golden at the time. It was ripe for the picking. And but not everybody was totally on board with it. Bobby was like, why do we need Duane Allman? You're Eric Clapton. You could play all this stuff. And if you listen to the first 3 tracks, I looked away and keep on. I mean, yes, he's overdubbing his guitars, but he's very capable. And that's just Eric. Duane doesn't play on those tracks at all. So that's just Eric on those 3 tracks. So note for note, they're matching each other, and also those high pitched notes too, very high end. And Eric is right up there with Duane. So that you don't know who's doing what, and I don't care. Yeah. At this point, I don't care. After all these years, it's just a fine. I said it. I think I said it once before. I think it's probably one of the greatest guitar rock albums ever made.
Yep, 100%.
No doubt.
Chris, you agree with that?
So
I absolutely do. It's just and that's the whole thing is like, to me, like, and I like a lot of jam bands. I love the Allmans. I love the Grateful Dead. But to me, what makes this record is the songs. These are really great, well-written songs, and it doesn't matter who's playing on them. It's just you're inspired by what you're hearing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's actually one contemporary cover on this album, right? At the time, this came out in 1970. Little Wing from Jimi Hendrix. That was like a year or 2 old. I mean, that was like a contemporary cover. That's how much respect they had for Hendrix. Was let's take a crack at that now. Chris, which version do you like better?
Actually, as much as
they're very different. They're very different.
As much as I like the Clapton version on the record, the Hendrix version to me is timeless. In fact, my favorite Hendrix album is Axis Bold as Love, which is where Little Wing is from. So
okay.
As much as I like this album, I like the Hendrix version better.
All right, Eric, should I bother asking you?
You know what, I like both, but I feel like Hendrix's version is just very sort of there. It's just very loose, as he is.
Yeah.
Right. Especially on that record, as Chris, on Axis. I like the majesty of, they feel like they're doing something very reverential. Yeah. Here. It almost feels like an anthem in itself.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The song has like an epic feel to it, almost like it's like something bigger and grandiose.
And that's the thing, though. It's like this was just an afterthought. This was after the album was completed. Eric was like, well, what else can we do? And it was Duane Allman's idea to come up, let's do a cover of a Hendrix tune. Let's just pay tribute to Jim, and I think Jimmy was still alive at the time.
Yeah, he was still alive.
I don't think he ever really got to hear their version of it, unfortunately, because he would tragically pass. And that seems to be the curse of Eric Clapton, isn't it? Which is kind of eerie to me. Over the years, all of these great contemporaries, his peers, he gets to know these guys because they're either A, the competition, or B, he realizes that I'm not as great as they are, but I gotta get to know these guys. I need that inspiration. I need that spark. Unfortunately, they would all, in his wake, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jeff Beck, after a long, and Clapton's alive and well.
Yeah.
It's kind of odd that he's
the guy that probably
much the only one left.
Yeah. The guy that in the 70s you probably thought wouldn't have made it with all the addiction, the heroin.
He should have died 10 times over.
Oh, absolutely.
The alcoholism, the everything. He's kind of like the Brian Wilson in the 70s. Yeah. Like the guy that thought would be dead first is the guy that's still alive. So, Little Wing, right? We talked about that. And there's a, not that I thought there was more covers on this album. I thought a lot of this was cover stuff, and it's not really. A lot of it's originals. There's only 5 covers, like Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out, Key to the Highway, Have You Ever Loved a Woman, Little Wing, and It's Too Late. And I think those are good. I do like Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. That's like a blues classic, or he made it a classic. I think he took some of these. I think on Layla, bringing some of these songs out into the open also kind of made them Clapton classics, I guess, in his kind of not discography, but in his performances, he would kind of pull some of those out, right? Like Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out.
Key to the Highway has always been a standard.
Key to the Highway.
It's always been a staple.
Yeah, that's Big Bill.
Nobody Knows You a lot too.
Yeah.
Some of these choices though are smart. I mean, Have You Ever Loved a Woman Freddie King made it famous. He loved Freddie King. He was like, I think he's probably as far as his style, Clapton's style, he plays like Freddie. You couldn't ask for a better song. That pretty much nails it right there about George and Patty. Yeah. And and why bother writing songs if you got this song, which pretty much says it all, like so. But it's I think it was pretty smart to include that into this mix, and his love of blues, and of course that might have been one of the first choices that he made before all of this songwriting began. But him and Duane on that song, oh my God, Jesus! I mean, it's just it's heaven, I mean, he would do several other takes of it. But the version that it appears on the album is just it's phenomenal.
Yeah, and Bell Bottom Blues is another direct Patty Boyd connection, right? Because he was in America, or he was going to America, and she said, "Hey, can you get me some bell bottom pants from America, like these American pants?" And he did, but he was like he got them for her, but he still didn't have her. He was, and so she was kind of teasing him, kind of like that's kind of. I think she kind of knew and kind of.
I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
played it to her advantage.
No
doubt.
But when you consider how many songs were written about something, by the Beatles, I mean that's about her. I mean, how many freaking songs did they write about this woman?
Yeah.
I mean,
she's like the original.
Later on, like Wonderful Tonight, Old Love off of Journeyman is about her. The regret of losing her, and but he kind of, the one song that he was kind of being a dick about was Shape Out You're In, because that's when he was trying to be on the wagon and she became an alcoholic. And he's like, he wrote a song about her alcoholism. So he's like, yeah, that's off of Money and Cigarettes. And it's a horrible song. It's a catchy tune for sure, but it's about her and her. And he's just being such an asshole to her,
That's
it's
kind of rough.
It is. It really is. Yeah.
What about his vocal? What about Clapton's vocals on this album, Chris? He kind of got, I kind of, and it seems to be a trend with me. I kind of like when artists get a little older and their vocals get a little sandpaper on them.
Right.
This was still kind of that. This was still that early Clapton kind of finding his way vocally, except on Layla, he just lets it rip, and you could tell, he just kind of goes for it.
I definitely get the sandpaper in the voice and the older voice, but what I like about the vocals on this isn't necessarily so much the tenor of his voice, but the delivery. Mm-hmm. You can almost feel the pain in a lot of the songs, like Bell Bottom Blues, the way he delivers that chord. Do you want to see me crawl across the floor? In the way, just his delivery, you can tell he really means what he like. It's one of those records where you listen to and I really know what he means. Like I know he definitely means what he's singing. Like I think that comes across in his vocal delivery on this record really well, and that's what I really like about it.
Yeah, and Eric, that's a cornerstone of the blues, right? Is feeling the music. I mean, that's part and parcel with playing blues music. You can't just kind of play blues music and be like, oh, I'm going to play. You've got to feel it. And I think that in the case for Clapton, him being a blues player, where he was at, that style of music fit perfectly to also be the vehicle. These covers that he chose, perfectly fit in with everything else that he was doing on this album, because you have to be we said, you literally have to live those things, and he was living it. And so those covers that he selected really kind of fit right into it, right? They kind of slot in almost seamlessly.
There's that famous quote from Phil Collins, actually, who said, what the fuck do you know about the blues when you're driving around in a Maserati and and all this, and Clapton's like, it's a state of mind, though. Yeah. It's not because you're poor necessarily, or you're not necessarily a question of class. It's about or status. It's about a state of mind, and in this case, he was so. I mean, his story. I mean, if you I'm not going to go into it, but if you're ever inclined, I would highly recommend, read his autobiography that he wrote. I mean, there's a lot of
was it called
sad story.
Was it called I Shot the Sheriff?
Oh, it's just simply called Clapton.
Okay.
But there was stuff in there that shocked the hell out of me, chilled me to the bone. Some really sad stories in there of his childhood and things like that. And it's just, you'd understand why he chose to do this kind of music, and he's so enamored with it. But, but getting back to his singing, he's backed by a great singer. Bobby Whitlock has a powerful voice. If you've ever heard the guy off of this record sing some of these songs, which he has done for years, he performs this album endlessly in Texas. Him and his wife, his wife Coco, they play bars and stuff, and they play the entire record. But to hear him do some of this stuff, like there's a YouTube. I just watched a YouTube video of him performing on the Jules Holland show. He's performing bell bottom, and Clapton's playing along, but he's not singing. It's Bobby Whitlock singing at the piano.
Oh, that's cool.
And he actually, it's beautiful.
Wow.
Because I'd never heard him sing the lead, of this. And it's just, and Clapton's coming in with that falsetto, backing him with that falsetto. But to hear Bobby Whitlock do it was just like a whole new dynamic. I had never seen that before. And it was just beautiful.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
So, but like, again, Clapton's surrounding himself with people that are great. And he needed that. He needed that boost. He always needs that boost to, because he knows he's not that great. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, and people put him on this pedestal, but to know that you're not that great, but to channel those emotions when he's at his best. That's why I love what he does in that sense, because, I'd never put him at the same level as of a Hendrix or Stevie Ray Vaughan but when there's just something about the emotion of his playing, especially in a solo where he reaches those really high notes and he's bending those strings, and it's some of the most beautiful playing you've ever heard. It's just, for me, it's the idea of channeling a human voice through guitar. He's not doing a lot of shredding and noodling and fancy fretware. I mean, it's just single notes. Those single notes are like a voice, and that, I'm not a guitar player, so but I am into singing, and I like a lot of vocalists, so I understand that side of it, the language of that, and I think that's why certain guitar players appeal to me in that way,
Cool.
So, but
alrighty,
yeah,
all right, let's take this opportunity to jump into 3 Lies and a Truth. We've talked about a lot. Actually, some of the stuff I have on here is stuff that we've talked about. So I don't know if my hand has been tipped, but we're going to go ahead and give it a shot. We've got 4 statements here. 3 of them are bold-faced lies. They're untrue. Only one nugget, one factoid out of the 4 is the real deal. I'm already regretting this one, because Eric is just going to mop the floor. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it. I'm looking at it, and I'm like, this is a fucking joke. Why am I even bothering with this one? But here we go. Let me read out the 4 statements, and then I'm going to let Eric go last, because I'm not letting him tip Chris's hand. I got a snag. I got to get one fish with this bait. I got to try and get one.
I don't know.
So here we go. 3 lies and a truth. 4 statements. 3 of them are false. Only one is true. At home, be ready to play along. Hit us up on social media. Let us know how you did. Here we go. First statement. A, Eric Clapton is the only 4-time Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee. B, Rick Derringer, who was also recording at Criteria Studios, suggested recording Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. C, Clapton's nickname Slowhand came from his Yardbirds tenure. When he would break a guitar string, he would stay on stage and replace it, garnering slow hand claps from the audience while they waited for him to do it. D, although Clapton asked Duane Allman to leave the Allman Brothers and stay with the Dominos, after Duane Allman's death, the Allman Brothers actually asked Clapton if he would join them. A, I'll do it one more time. Clapton is the only 4-time Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee. B, Rick Derringer, who was also recording at Criteria Studios, suggested recording Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. And then they did it. C. Eric Clapton's nickname Slowhand came from his Yardbirds tenure. When he would break a string on stage, a guitar string, he would stay on stage and replace it, garnering slow hand claps from the audience while they waited for him to finish. D. Although Clapton asked Duane Allman to leave the Allman Brothers and join Derek and the Dominos, after Duane Allman's death, the band asked Clapton to join them to consider it. Christopher Clark, you're first on the block. First catch of the day, as they say in, was it Empire or Jedi? First catch of the day.
What was the second one again?
The second one is Rick Derringer, who played with Johnny Edgar Winter. He was the guitarist for the McCoys, Hang On Sloopy. He was also recording at Criteria Studios. He suggested to them while he was there, saying, "Hey, why don't you guys record Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out?"
That's the one that sounds the most true to me. I think you got me, but I think it's B. That's my guess.
With B. Rick Derringer, who was also recording at Criteria, suggested recording Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. All right. Eric, no pressure.
I tip my hat to you, sir, because all of these are... No, seriously, you really are... You did your homework because, oh,
boy.
Jesus. I'm going to go with C.
C. Clapton's nickname Slowhand.
I've heard that story. Yeah.
Came from his Yardbirds tenure. When he would break a guitar string on stage, he would stay there and replace it, garnering slow hand claps from the audience while they waited.
I'm going to go with C.
Yeah. He's going to go with C. And Christopher Clark is going with B. Rick Derringer. Okay. The first lie. Eric Clapton is the only 4-time Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee. He's actually the only 3-time Rock and Roll Hall of Fame inductee. Cream, the Yardbirds, and solo. Not Han, just solo. Lie number 2. Although Eric Clapton asked Allman to leave the Allman Brothers and stay with the Dominos after Duane Allman's death, the band asked Clapton to join him. I just made that up. There's no truth in that whatsoever. That's not even based in any reality.
I knew that was never going to be.
Yeah, it didn't sound right to me either.
All right, so we've got 2 left. We've got Chris with Rick Derringer, who was also recording at Criteria Studios, suggested recording Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. And then Eric went with Clapton's nickname Slowhand story. The truth of the matter is Clapton's nickname Slowhand came from his Yardbirds tenure. When he would break a guitar string, he would stay on stage and replace it, garnering slow hand claps from the audience while they waited. That is the truth. B, Rick Derringer. It actually wasn't Rick Derringer. That actually did happen, but it was Sam Samudio. Do you guys know who Sam Samudio is?
I've never heard that name before.
I know who he was. He was recording. Sam Samudio was recording at Criteria Studios. He was the one that suggested recording Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. Sam Samudio is the Sam of Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. They had the song Wooly Bully in the 60s. Wooly Bully.
Yeah. Now, you know what? Now that you're saying it, I do remember hearing that story. Yeah. About Sam the Sham.
It was Sam Samudio that did it. So, Eric, you did it. You did it. You knew you were
did it. But like I said, those were very, very good.
They were really hard, man.
Yeah.
Made him sweat.
Because I mean, you did.
The only one I knew for sure was A. That one I knew wasn't right, but the other ones I was completely stumped.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for playing, and at home, let us know how you did. Hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube, and let us know if you got it correct as well. Now, there's a second story about Slowhand, but about how he got his nickname. But this was the one that came up all the time. There seems to be almost a legend of like different ways, but this seems to be the earliest accounting of, because they would call that when people would clap it, they would call it slow handing people when you clapped like slow, like while you were waiting or whatever. And the guy in the Yardbirds is the guy that said that. He goes, this is how we gave him the nickname, because he would just stand there and change the guitar string while people are waiting in the audience.
Yeah.
So they're giving him like the golf clap, like kind of, all right. Let's, kind of,
hey, let's go. Yeah.
Yeah. It was slow handing him. So that's where it came from. So, all righty, let's talk about some favorites. Now, I challenged you gentlemen before we came on instead of doing favorite songs, I figured it might be fun to do favorite sides. Do you guys have that ready or no? Is that too much to go with? You want to go with favorite songs? I think it's fun to kind of, because I think they go in nice. I think they're broken up into interesting sections and broken up interestingly. So I think it would be fun to. I have two sides that I really like, and you'll probably be able to easily pick them out. There are two sides. But Chris, what do you have for favorite sides?
Probably side one.
Side one?
Probably side one, but I really do love side two as well. Like that whole first record of the two records, that's definitely where I live when I listen to this record. Those are my favorite tracks.
Yeah, side one is I Looked Away, Bell Bottom Blues, Keep On Growing, and Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out. I picked side one as one of my favorites also as well. I think it just starts I think it really starts the album off kind of in a good way. It's kind of got three originals right off the bat. Kind of get you in the feel for it, and then Nobody Knows You When You're Down and Out really just kind of fills out that side.
And then having said that, I think my favorite track on the record is probably Key to the Highway. I just love the way they cover that song, and I love his lead playing on it and stuff. It's just he sounds like a blues. You know, it's not a rock and roll tune. He's playing it like it's a blues record, like the way it's supposed to sound. So, you know, to me, that's probably the best song on the album.
Eric.
You know the story behind why it fades in?
I do.
No.
You can tell Chris.
Yeah, I mean they start. It was a jam for sure. I mean it was so good. But you know, Tom Dowd, he wasn't rolling the tape.
Oh no!
At the time, and it was like, oh man, we're fucking losing this. So you know, roll it. That's why it fades in, and you're just getting it as they're getting going on it. It's just an interesting. I always wondered why.
Wasn't he in the? I read that he was in the bathroom, Tom Dowd. So they were playing, and he ran in, and was still like pulling up his pants.
Because it sounded.
And they're like, get the faders up. What are you doing? Because he wasn't in the control room.
He wasn't in the control room, and he heard it, and he's like, "Man, this sounds beautiful!" Like, you know, and he came out.
None of the faders were up.
So
that's awesome.
This is difficult for me because when you really consider how the flow of this record goes, all the way through, it's like you're eating a hearty meal, right? I mean, at the end of this album, I don't feel like listening to anything else for the rest of the day because you have such strong songs. Like, you know, on every side there's Bell Bottom Blues, and then you have my favorite track is Any Day. I love that one because it's a song, and there's no real like heavy like jamming or soloing on it, but the guitars are formidable on it anyway, and you got those vocals, and it really gets passionate by the end of it. I think it's just as good as Layla or any of the others that are just sort of shouting out his love for her. You know, it's like, I want to, you know, someday I'm going to make you smile and all that kind of stuff. And it's very specific too. The lyrics are very specific on that one, which I really dig.
And the way it comes out of I Am Yours, this like really mellow, chill song, and it just kind of like kicks in. It's really sequenced well too.
And that's the only song on the record that actually quotes the poem that this whole thing is actually based on, is inspired by, was Layla and Majnun, which is it's a Persian version of Romeo and Juliet, basically, you know. And interestingly enough, the latest Tedeschi Trucks project is a response to this album. I Am the Moon. The singer of the band wanted to, during lockdown, they couldn't tour, so they were like, what are we going to do? We have to record something. And he came up with the idea of reading the entire poem, which is like 100-page thing. And he went to Derek and Susan and said, look, you know, we perform this album, we do the songs, you know, but it's awful one-sided. It's Eric Clapton saying, I love you so fucking much, it hurts, you know, whatever. What about her point of view? What's her point of view? What do people around these two, or what are they feeling? So their latest project is based on that, which I think is awesome. So there's that cool. That connection. And they did it they broke it up into 24 tracks into 4 separate albums. and it's great, and it's just a really nice response to that. Not that it sounds like Layla; they're not trying to sound like Derek and the Dominos on it or anything, but it's just great that there's another perspective, and the fact that there's something there to kind of fuel that, and to really get you back into this record.
Yeah.
But if I had to choose,
time.
I think it's going to be probably 3 and 4. I think that's really where the strength of the album comes into play for me. Why Does Love Got to Be So Sad? That's so fast and furious. I love the way, the soloing at the end, the way they kind of play over one another, and it just, the way it ends is beautiful. It's just, I love Have You Ever Loved a Woman? That's probably my favorite blues song that Clapton has ever done. Because he's done it in shows like that, and over the years, but that's my favorite blues cover that he's ever done. And yeah. And then you get to Layla, which is basically the cherry on top, right? It's the the icing on the cake, as it were. After all of these really great songs, strong, and then you got Layla, which is a force unto itself.
It's the crescendo of the album. It kind of it builds to that, and that's why I'm going with 1 and 4 are my favorite sides. The beginning, the start of the album, and then the end. Like, again, you open on side 4 with Little Wing, and like Eric said, it's got this majesty, or it's got this epicness to it. It feels like this big song, which I really dig. I really dig that version. So for me, 1 and 4 are the ones. So, Christopher Clark, any closing thoughts on Layla and other assorted love songs?
I think Layla's an amazing song. It's timeless. It's iconic. I think it's made even more iconic by its appearance in Goodfellas.
I was just going to say, you beat me too. I was going to say, we went an hour and 15 minutes and we did not even mention Goodfellas, and the fact that only the back half of the song, the instrumental part. So it actually lives. The song actually lives in 2 universes, as this love song and this confession. But then there's this whole other instrumental thing that is iconic in film, that you can't ever just hear that guitar, that guitar break, and not think of all these slow panning shots of dead gangsters. Right? These slow
in a pink Cadillac.
Carbone was so frozen.
Frenchie rolling out of the garbage truck, like like
De Niro has coffee in a diner.
Never was a song, and I think we said it during the Goodfellas episode, Eric, where that song was used as score. It was used as score. It was to score that and a lot of people in 89 or 90 when it came out, I'll even give you, a lot of people may not even they probably knew, without hearing the rest of the song in context, they knew the song, but not where it was from. Like,
I would agree with that.
Without the context of the beginning of the song, when you get it from the middle or from the back third or whatever it is, from just it's, oh wow, I know this. Like I know this composition, but without hearing the beginning context, it transcended even what the song was trying to do, and became cinematic in its own right. You can't ever think of it without.
And the drummer took credit for it, but it's generally accepted in the rock and roll lore that his girlfriend Rita Coolidge actually wrote it. It's a part of one of her songs. Like, if you listen, I can't remember for the life of me the name of the song, but if you listen to the song, you hear the melody. It's the coda to Layla, and it kind of sucks that she kind of didn't get the credit or the financial reward that she deserves for that cut.
She was big in the 70s, Rita Coolidge, and she used to be married to Chris Christopherson back in the day too. When they were together. So Rita Coolidge was,
she was part of the Mad Dogs and Englishmen thing, that whole big band sort of thing.
And so was Jim Gordon.
Yeah. Eric, closing thoughts on Layla and other assorted love songs?
It's an icon. This is definitely a desert island disc. It always will be. For me, one of my top 5 favorite albums I've ever. And I totally agree. The best thing that Clapton ever did. But again, I would iterate that it's it's definitely better than the sum of its parts. I think the spirit, the collaborative spirit on it, the sort of the chemistry between him and Duane, I think is unparalleled. I don't think there's any, and I don't think there's ever been an album quite like it in the sense of that coming together so quickly, so effortlessly, and it's just magic, you know. And it's the best. And Tom Dowd, even to quote Tom Dowd, he goes, "That's the best." When he was all said and done, he's like, "That's the best goddamn record I've ever made in the last 10 years, I think, 10 years or something like that." And he's played with like Ray Charles and people like that. So Coltrane and, you know, so to say that's high praise, right?
Very, very high praise.
Yeah. I'll leave it there.
Final note from me.
Then,
go ahead, Chris. What do you got?
I was going to say, the other thing is you guys should all check out, I'm sure you guys have heard it, the Tedeschi Trucks Band performance of it that they put out on record is fantastic.
Oh, I have it. Yeah.
Really great record.
That was,
Eric is an Uber fan of Tedeschi Trucks, so you're preaching to the choir.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, because for me, it's you know, it's like they're picking up where this stuff left off as far as I'm concerned, and this is some of the most beautiful music. It's a band that's out there hardworking. There's no frills to them. I love what they're doing, and I support them. Been a fan of them since they started. When I saw Derek play with Eric at Madison Square Garden, I've been a fan of him ever since. So, you know, I'm just shout out to them and just continue to do what you're doing. And, you know, we love you. And interestingly enough, Thorn Tree in the Garden was the only, they didn't perform that song. They recorded it in the studio. So they actually went back and redid it as a cover there. Do you know what that song's about, by the way? Does anybody know? Do you guys know?
Nope.
That's Bobby Whitlock wrote that song, and it's about his dog.
Oh, there you go.
It's about a dog. It's about his favorite dog had died, and it's not about Patty Boyd. It's about his dog. It's, you know, so that's, and he brings Eric and Duane, and, you know, and even on that such a quiet number, they're both playing on it, and it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. What a way to great way to end it. So I'm going to shut up.
Well, I'm gonna leave everybody with one last bit of trivia. Eric, in the beginning of the episode, Eric mentioned that the cover was done by a French painter, and Clapton actually had the actual painting, and he gave it to Patty Boyd. Patty Boyd just recently sold that painting. She sold it for $2.5 million. I guess she needed the cash. I don't know. Is that something? Is that something you sell? Like that's
need a payday.
Yeah, you couldn't ask for a loan from somebody. You know, like, no, I'm sorry. I mean, it's an iconic. Like you had said earlier, like, oh, the album was nondescript. There was no band name, no title on it, and that painting now has sold for $2.5 million of that. That's how iconic that image has become. It's become instantly recognizable in the rock circles. But anyway. I digress. She's got to do what she's got to do, and if I had it, I'd probably sell it for $2.5 million. Also, 2.5 and 1 cent to beat hers. But that's going to do it for this episode of 3324 podcast. Christopher Clark, another humdinger. Thank you very much, sir, for joining us on this expedition, and thank you for being
great conversation, man.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Thank you for being the sacrificial lamb on Three Lies and the Truth. I appreciate it. There's always got to be one. There's got to be one that gets sacrificed to Mola Ram, and it was you this time. Everybody, you can hit us up, won't you, on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. Let us know if you've ever listened to Layla, or, you know, how does it affect you, and what are your feelings about it? Is it one of the greatest? Was it Clapton's high watermark, or was there more to come? Let us know. We'll engage. Even Christopher, you know, all of us will engage you on social media. So start the conversation, and we'd love to love to continue it. It's available on Spotify. There's a remastered version. There's been all kinds of other vinyl releases. It's gotten the expanded release thing. You know, it's been done to death as well. So that's out there also as for your consumption as well. So that's going to do it here for Chris. And for Eric, this has been Dean. And you know what? Eric and I he's going to be waiting on that couch, and I'm going to be waiting in this green IKEA chair until the next time I will change the chair one day, but now it's almost become iconic, the green IKEA chair. But we'll be waiting.
That's a mouthful.
The green IKEA chair.
There you go.
We will we will see you real soon the next time. And like I said, for Chris, for Eric, this has been Dean, and we will catch you on the flip side.
You've been listening to the 3324 podcast with Dean Legiro and Eric Kuber. You can find us on your favorite podcast provider, so please like, subscribe, and rate to become a part of the 3324 family. Your feedback is important, so make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at 3324 podcast and on Twitter at 3324p to join the conversation.